In a second time round with a second child that I might not make it if I had to get all the way to Shrewsbury. When we arrived at the Women and Children's Centre, it was really reassuring, a purpose-built facility, brand new equipment. As a first-time mum, it was a really nice environment to be in, and I feel that it would be a shame for it now to close.
My little boy was poorly when he was about 11 weeks old. He had something called pyloric stenosis. The service that we received was amazing. Because everything was there and all together on site, we didn't have to travel anywhere. It didn't upset him because the condition that he had made that if he was in the car he was really uncomfortable. Telford's a really growing town. It's very new. They've got a lot of young families and it's just growing, and they're going to have more and more need to have something nearby to take their children to if they need to in an emergency. It's the most scariest thing in the world if you have a problem with your child, and for you to then have to travel with a poorly child that's screaming in the car is also really dangerous to have, because you're just scared. All you want to do is get them well and get them to the best place possible in the shortest amount of time, and just to get the help that you need.
I've got a 7-year-old severely disabled child who suffers from many illnesses, but vocal cord paralysis is one of them. So he can't take any liquids, he's peg fed, he's got chronic lung disease. There's a severe risk of him aspirating any liquids that he might swallow. So we tend to use the hospital. We have open access at the Women and Children's Hospital. He vomited the once, and within an hour he'd collapsed, he'd just drowned, and he had to be rushed to, that was the A&E at that time, to resus. Other times he gets rushed in because he can't breathe, so he's actually died in the ambulance the once, so going to Shrewsbury, I just don't know if he would have made it.
We've now received official confirmation from the Health Secretary, Matt Hancock, that he will support the plans to downgrade our Accident and Emergency Department at the Princess Royal Hospital and to close our consultant-led Women's and Children's Unit. This simply does not make sense and flies in the face of common sense. We need to come together as a borough, as a business community, as politicians of all political parties, to get the Health Secretary to come from Whitehall to join us here at the Town Hall for us to explain the impacts of this decision on the residents of Telford Wrekin. It seems that the campaign to protect services is simply a political one now. Although a judicial review will be looked at by the council, this is an expensive and unpredictable way forward, and we still don't know what the strength of that legal case. So we need to make the case directly to the person who's made the decision, the Health Secretary, and you can do so using the contact details upon the screen now. Make it clear to him why you think the decision is wrong. Members of Parliament, local councillors, residents, businesses, organisations need to come together, even at the 11th hour, to overturn this decision. We need you to put your name and your arguments directly to the government.
Hi, I'm Kira and I live in Shifnal. This time last year I was pregnant with twins, which means that they had to spend an awful lot of time in the neonatal unit at the Women and Children's unit. So we spent 54 days there in total, and if the Women and Children's unit hadn't been in the Princess Royal, we'd have had to go all the way to Shrewsbury, which would have meant over an hour's worth of journeying each and every day, because we were there had to get there at 10 every morning. Because I had premature babies, if I was to get pregnant again, I would have to be consultant led. I would definitely be unhappy if the Women and Children's unit left the Princess Royal in Wellington.
In 2017, I was in labour with my daughter and I had to get blue lighted to the Women and Children's Centre. Within half an hour of getting to the centre, I gave birth. I would worry if this was to happen a second time round with a second child that I might not make it if I had to get all the way to Shrewsbury. When we arrived at the Women and Children's Centre, it was really reassuring, a purpose-built facility, brand new equipment. As a first-time mum, it was a really nice environment to be in, and I feel that it would be a shame for it now to close.
My little boy was poorly when he was about 11 weeks old. He had something called pyloric stenosis. The service that we received was amazing. Because everything was there and all together on site, we didn't have to travel anywhere. It didn't upset him because the condition that he had made that if he was in the car he was really uncomfortable. Telford's a really growing town. It's very new. They've got a lot of young families and it's just growing, and they're going to have more and more need to have something nearby to take their children to if they need to in an emergency. It's the most scariest thing in the world if you have a problem with your child, and for you to then have to travel with a poorly child that's screaming in the car is also really dangerous to have, because you're just scared. All you want to do is get them well and get them to the best place possible in the shortest amount of time, and just to get the help that you need.
I've got a 7-year-old severely disabled child who suffers from many illnesses, but vocal cord paralysis is one of them. So he can't take any liquids. He's peg fed, he's got chronic lung disease. There's a severe risk of him aspirating any liquids that he might swallow. So we tend to use the hospital. We have open access at the Women and Children's Hospital. He vomited the once, and within an hour he'd collapsed. He'd just drowned, and he had to be rushed to, that was the A&E at that time, to resus. Other times he gets rushed in because he can't breathe, so he's actually died in the ambulance the once. So going to Shrewsbury, I just don't know if he would have made it.
We've now received official confirmation from the Health Secretary, Matt Hancock, that he will support the plans to downgrade our Accident and Emergency Department at the Princess Royal Hospital and to close our consultant-led Women's and Children's Unit. This simply does not make sense and flies in the face of common sense. We need to come together as a borough, as a business community, as politicians of all political parties, to get the Health Secretary to come from Whitehall to join us here at the Town Hall for us to explain.
Good evening, members, ladies and gentlemen, and welcome to this extraordinary meeting of the Borough of Telford and Wrekin. Can I hand you over to the Speaker to commence tonight's business?
Right, thank you, Mr. Mayor, and welcome to everybody. Item 1 is apologies for absence.
We have apologies this evening from Councillors Carolyn Healy, Jackie Loveridge, Jane Pinter, Lee Carter and Janice Jones.
Okay, are there any other apologies for absence?
Jackie Seymour, if you could.
Jackie Seymour.
She's on, well, mercifully, she's on holiday, so.
Okay, right, is that it? Any other apologies? No, moving on. Declarations of interest. Are there any declarations of interest? Councillor White.
Member of the HOSC, we have to declare an interest, not to speak, not to vote.
Thank you. Councillor Middleton. Okay, thank you. Councillor Burrell.
Thank you, Chair. I declare a similar interest, but I must say that it will be quite a disappointment not to take part in and vote on this motion. Thank you, Speaker.
Did you speak to Gemma? She's just arrived, hasn't she?
Yeah,
She's okay.
she'll be.
Okay. Right. Any other declarations of interest? Okay. Thank you. Right. We now have the motion. The reason we are here, and it's been agreed that I will read it out so it doesn't take the time out of the mover. So the motion that we have, which will be moved by Councillor Sean Davis and seconded by Councillor Andy Burford. This council condemns the Health Secretary decision to allow future fit to progress. This will have a detrimental impact on residents of Telford and Wrekin and put lives at risk. The decision flies in the face of the evidence and common sense. The decision made by the Secretary of State is simply wrong. At this stage, we call on the government to halt future fit. Such moves will mean that Telford will be one of the biggest towns in the country without a full A&E. The closure of the consultant-led Women and Children's Unit flies in the face of clinical evidence. Telford and Wrekin Council has fought this process every step of the way and will continue to fight for the best interests of our residents. This should not be about politics. This council expects our MPs to support the council and use every parliamentary means to ensure our consultant-led Women and Children's Unit is retained and our A&E is not downgraded. Right, Councillor Davis.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I move the proposal, a non-controversial motion, I hope, that we all as councillors can come together to unite in sending a simple and clear message to the Health Secretary and to this government that they must halt Future Fit, and an expectation that members of Parliament for Telford and the Wrekin use all parliamentary means possible to ensure that that takes place. First of all, Mr. Speaker, I'd like to pay tribute to Katrina Gilman, the parliamentary prospective parliamentary candidate for the Labour Party in Telford, who has secured an immediate commitment from John Ashworth, the Shadow Health Secretary, that if Labour wins the next general election, then Future Fit will be halted. Mr. Speaker, we simply, and with a degree of modesty, ask this government to commit the same. Mr. Speaker, we knew eventually this decision would become a political one, a decision that the Health Secretary could no longer shirk, could no longer sit on the fence, and a Health Secretary that had to make a decision in the interests of our residents here in Telford and Wrekin and the residents of Shropshire and Mid Wales. The reality of the situation is that there are no winners under Future Fit. Mid Wales patients lose out, Shropshire patients lose out, and Telford and Wrekin patients lose out. And Mr. Speaker, it is Telford and Wrekin residents who disproportionately lose out. Mr. Speaker, it cannot be right, can it, that Telford, as one of the fastest growing towns in the country, would become the largest town in the country without a fully functioning A&E. And a consultant-led Women's and Children's Unit opened 5 years ago at the cost of £27 million, which will be downgraded. And I know, Mr. Speaker, like many people in this room, that have benefited from the amazing care of the amazing staff at the consultant-led Women's and Children's Unit. And I know, Mr. Speaker, like many of you in the room, when you speak to staff at the consultant-led Women's and Children's Unit privately, they are aghast at the decision that this Health Secretary is making. And we simply say, Mr. Speaker, not in our name will we allow this to continue. I accept, Mr. Speaker, it's been a long road fought with dangers politically. We've been told that we should be abolished as a council because we had the audacity to stand up for the residents that we represent. And Mr. Speaker, we've had a number of political challenges too. But Mr. Speaker, ultimately, this is not about politics. This comes down to people in this room who are Telford and Wrekin residents, residents who live here, who have family here, who know people here. And it's about supporting a motion that clearly says to the Health Secretary that we will not accept this decision. I accept, Mr. Speaker, even at this 11th hour, the chances of getting this decision overturned are slim, but we must try anyway. Mr. Speaker, I agree with Lucy Allen. It is up to Boris Johnson and Matt Hancock to prove that they are the party of the NHS, like they claim, and halt and scrap Future Fit. And Mr. Speaker, I warn people not to be confused or misled by the spin of some Conservative politicians who try and get us to accept an A&E local. An A&E local is for spin doctors, not for medical doctors. And the reality is, even if A&E local was acceptable as a proposition, we would lose our consultant-led Women's and Children's Unit from this town. A personal red line of mine, a red line for the Labour administration, and I hope through this motion, Mr. Speaker, we can demonstrate that it is a red line for this council and it's a red line for our members of Parliament. So let's put our differences to one side, even at this 11th hour. Let's unite. Let's send a crystal clear message to the government that this cannot go on. Mr. Speaker, I would be saying this and I would be making this same speech if we had a Labour Health Secretary here in this country, and I hope, Mr Speaker, that members opposite will make the same speech with their Conservative Minister in charge. Thank you.
Thank you, Leader. Councillor Burford.
Thank you, Mr Speaker. Mr Speaker, in seconding this motion, I'd like to sketch out a positive vision of what a plan for a joined-up, effective, accountable health service would look like in our borough. It would, of course, recognise, as Councillor Davis has said, that the fastest growing town in the country needs its own emergency care, 24 hours a day with full backup in terms of beds and medical staff. When you put it like that, it sounds like a no-brainer. That's because it is. It would recognise that a borough that has 15 areas that are ranked in the 10% most deprived nationally should keep its consultant-led Women and Children's Centre that was placed here 5 years ago based on a clinical need that hasn't changed. Another no-brainer, you would think. Thirdly, the plan would ensure that there is real local accountability for the health service in our borough, with governance that does not deny or dismiss the views of our residents as to what's best for them. Fourthly, and linked to this, it would ensure partnership. Since I took over the Cabinet role in May, I've seen just how creative and dedicated our staff in adult social care are in driving forward a public health-led programme of integrated care with our NHS and voluntary and community sector partners at a local level. There is some fantastic and really effective work happening aimed at keeping people out of hospital and residential care and properly cared for in their own homes and our communities. It is win-win stuff, and for me personally, it's an antidote to the stories I hear about failing emergency and treatment services where doctors and nurses are worn down by inadequate staffing levels and increasing demand. But unless these primary and community services have proper investment, there is no way that they can deliver at the scale needed to reduce the demand for emergency and hospital care. Finally, this vision, this plan, would not be compromised by those who tell us that something less than this is okay, and even that it is some kind of victory, or that we should be grateful for a £312 million loan, mark you, costing £50 million in debt local health economy, another £11 million a year in repayments, and which will mainly be used to make safe the crumbling infrastructure at a hospital 15 miles away. Or that a fig leaf solution of a part-time A&E local with a consultant acting in some kind of triage role without full backup or beds is okay. By the way, if it was more than that, the whole model for Future Fit would start to unravel, and it can't do what is claimed for it. In conclusion, our fight to get what our borough needs and deserves in terms of health provision continues. We will not be deterred by those who tell us we should be grateful for small mercies. Our MPs and their government are the ones who need to listen and act to stop this travesty. I second, Mr Speaker.
Thank you. Councillor Eade.
All right, thank you, Speaker. It's a great pity that this wasn't a joint motion, as this council has done in the past, on such issues that affect the borough as a whole. It's a great disappointment that despite my offer to jointly work on this issue on a cross-party basis has been spurned. And we've heard that, of course, this was a non-political issue or motion, and the opening lines from the leader would seem to belay that, where he, of course, gave a plug, as expected, to the local Labour candidate in Telford. Now, that really isn't acceptable on this sort of issue. If it's going to be non-party political, then we should deal with it as such. And perhaps if we had done, we could have avoided this mishmash motion that we have before us at the moment. Speaker, the decision has been made on the future hospital configuration by an independent review panel of health professionals, and not the Secretary of State as stated in this motion. However, I do find it disingenuous that this council is happy to accept the findings of one IRP on expenses and allowances for members of this authority on one hand, and display righteous indignation when the findings of the IRP on hospital services go against us on the other hand. Secondly, we simply do not know the details and implications of what an A&E local is, or what sort of consultant cover may come with it. Now, that's not ideal, but I suspect that this was released by the NHS before any political decisions or overview was made on it, and that clearly isn't acceptable on such an issue as this. Neither do we know that it could positively affect the retention of the Women and Children's Unit at the PRH, something which we unequivocally support and have done consistently throughout this issue. I would say that we die in a ditch over that, but that particular ditch may be full of all sorts of politicians in the coming future. Thus so, it's impossible for us to comment on the proposed PRH A&E provision in any detail whatsoever. This meeting is both ill-timed, and the motion, such as it is premature in the extreme. In fact, the motion itself proposes no strategic outcomes, no targets, no plan, no action, no thought, no alternative, and no proposals for a future route map to ensure the retention of the Women's and Children's Unit at the PRH. Do you know, to me, this council seems to be impotent and now embarking on its fourth different campaign strategy. That is extremely unhelpful. We've had the softly say nothing campaign, as we've supposedly been told that it was all in the bag. That was followed by an A&E at both the PRH and RSH, followed by an A&E at the PRH only, and now to be followed on the radio by let's build a hospital in the middle. Speaker, this Johnny-come-lately council did not even reply to our detailed report on such a configuration done in tandem with a visit to Northumberland by myself, Member of Parliament for the Wrekin, and the previous PRH Chief Executive, David Sandbach. Not only did this council totally ignore our proposals, but the leader of this authority made no attempt to even visit and see that configuration for themselves.
Can you wind up, please?
Yes, I will. Thank you. However, we are where we are, and as the saying goes, we all seem to be members of a council without a vision and a role. As for a judicial review, I also believe that that particular boat may have sailed, though like Councillor Davis, I'm no legal expert on such matters. Even so, this administration,
Councillor Reid, I'm getting points of order because you're well over time.
If you don't mind, this is an important issue.
No, you hear the floor. Could you wind up, please?
Look, this country is receiving the largest. This county is receiving the largest NHS investment that it's ever seen, 312 million in all. It's a huge statement by this government towards our future healthcare. I'm fully aware and have seen firsthand the work done by our two MPs, Lucy Allen and Mark Pritchard, have done to continue to work on our behalf and community.
Councillor Reid, you're being shouted down now. Could you finish, please?
Well, it's down to you, Speaker, really. This is an important issue. There are some points I want to make.
I've given additional time.
If you want to respond to the rabble, that sort of rabble effect, then that's up to you. But I think that's a shame, really. Because certainly the retention of A&E services and Women and Children's Unit is absolutely critical to us all.
And we totally agree on that.
May I suggest, for the sake of an extra minute, so I can make some points on this, that would not hurt at all.
Could you finish, please?
Can I?
I must ask you to
finish. Well, then I will finish. But can I suggest that, with everyone's agreement, we actually defer this evening's meeting?
No.
Until we're actually in possession of all the facts and of all the implications of an A&E local, so that we can debate this issue properly, because that is not the situation we're in at the moment.
That's not on the table. Thank you. Right. Can I call on Councillor Yanker, please?
Members, you'll be pleased to know that my speech isn't going to go on half as long as everybody else's. I'd just like to agree with the council leader and pay my respects to the fantastic NHS workers at PRH. In fact, all the hospitals in the local area. These are difficult times, but this week we've had our first glimpse of what A&E local actually means, and it was outlined by NHS England and reported via social media, and I have to say it doesn't make for great reading. For example, who gets to decide when core hours actually are? Who gets to decide when we are sick and in need of emergency care? I think it's frankly ridiculous, especially for somewhere the size of Telford and Wrekin. I think it's fair to say the majority of this chamber agree that we are in need of adequate emergency care services and maternity services. Let's not forget about the lack of consultant-led services. This means the current Women and Children's Centre structure will no longer be able to deliver consultant-led services in the area where it's clearly most needed, which is tragic in itself. The people in Telford and Wrekin are being sold short here by this decision. Young lives and old are being put at unnecessary risk, and it's not acceptable. Satellite towns like Newport in particular are, by geographical location alone, most adversely affected by this decision. And I'm of the opinion this Tesco Express hash is totally unacceptable in my view, and we should do everything we can to resist it. Thank you very much, Mr. Speaker.
Thank you. Call on. I have 6 more people indicated. I'll take them in the order 7 that I've got them. Councillor Sahota.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I don't think the people of Telford and Wrekin can now trust our 2 local MPs ever. They have really let down the people here in Telford and Wrekin. And not only our 2 local MPs, the Conservative government as well. Lucy Allen is now blaming, and I quote, the team of highly paid hospital managers, unquote, for losing our A&E and consultant-led Women and Children's Centre. For the last 4 years, she's been reassuring everyone in Telford that if they vote for her and her Conservative government, and that everything will be okay, and that Telford will have its own 24/7 A&E and consultant-led Women and Children's Centre. And last week, when the Health Secretary dropped the bombshell on the people of Telford and Wrekin, she started to blame the team of the so-called highly paid, the managers of the hospitals. But the final decision, Mr. Speaker, the final decision is with the Secretary of State for Health, and the so-called highly paid managers get their cue from the government. Ultimately, it is a responsibility of the Conservative government they are responsible for taking away our A&E. Mr. Speaker, we remember what Secretary of State for Health Jeremy Hunt said on his visit in 2015 general election, that Telford will have its own 24-hour A&E service department. But that was an election promise which turned out to be false. Now, Lucy Allen is saying that by losing all these services in Telford, it's nothing to do with her. Mr. Speaker, both our MPs have betrayed the trust and confidence of the people of Telford and Wrekin. They have let the people down, not only the MPs, but the Conservative governments as well. They let us down. They made promise after promise that there will be 24-hour A&E in Telford. Over 35,000 people signed a council petition asking to retain A&E in Telford. And I hope they will remember that. People of Telford and Wrekin will never forgive them for their betrayal and broken promise. And as Sean said, Labour Shadow Leader of Shadow Secretary of State for Health has promised that when there is a Labour government, then there will be a 24-hour A&E service at our local hospital, and I can't wait for that day. I support the motion. Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Veronica Fletcher.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. First of all, I would like to pay tribute to the PRH and the A&E department who helped me 2 years ago when I had my accident and broke my leg and arm. The most pertinent sentence in this motion is the closure of the consultant-led Women's and Children Unit flies in the face of clinical evidence. To ensure we retain this unit in Telford, we need to retain a consultant-led accident and emergency unit in Telford. We must fight to retain these services, and I wholeheartedly condemn the decision to transfer these units to Shrewsbury by the Hospital Trust and confirmed by the independent review body, not by government. It is the right thing to do for the people we represent. The unanimous decision taken in March 2011 by the then two primary care trusts, SAF, and agreed by the Telford and Shropshire Joint Overview and Health Scrutiny, which I chaired, to place the Women and Children's Unit in Telford and retain the two A&E units was the right decision, and is still the right decision today due to the demographic profile of Telford. When we checked the condition of Shrewsbury Hospital in 2010, it had been neglected and was in a very bad state of repair, and the Shrewsbury maternity unit was not fit for purpose. The South management have not addressed these failures, which have increased so much that 2 years ago, remedial repairs and rebuild costing £175 million were needed from the £312 million allocated for Future Fit. And these were to recover the rebuild to accommodate the Women and Children's Unit and update the A&E department in Shrewsbury. What is the cost of this today? The money should be used for patient care and support the up-to-date services required in the 21st century. Telford is the largest town in Shropshire, and the population has grown considerable since 2011 and is still growing with the new housing and thousands of new homes to be built. The demographic profiles show Telford had the greatest needs then, and it has the greatest need now for these facilities. It is incredulous that this and the consultation results, which were overwhelmingly support for Telford, has not swayed the decision of the Hospital Trust, confirmed by the independent review panel, not by government. Telford's needs have been ignored, and reportedly, I understand and quote, a senior member of the government has been told, on average, only 5 people per night use the A&E in Telford. In reality, it is 50. What is going on? The accurate figures, the truth must be told to those who influence and make decisions. It's more important than ever that we stand together to overturn the decision to allow Future Fit to destroy Telford's hospital. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
Thank you. Councillor Nelson, please. Next. I have 8 more speakers after Councillor Nelson.
Well, I'd like to claim I was going to be brief, Mr. Speaker.
I do hope so.
But I will speak about unity. Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Members, there is much more to unite us than divide us. We all have the same duty to our street, our ward, our town, our borough. We all care deeply about Telford, and we all care about what is best for our residents. We are all obliged to live in the borough, unlike senior healthcare professionals. And we have no duty I'm aware of to Central Wales. My colleagues and I have been utterly consistent in our condemnation of the origins, progress and declared outcome of the future fit hospital configuration for Shropshire. There must be no downgrade of the Princess Royal Hospital. None. This council has met many times to express concern and alarm at the threat to the PRH. We may have found fault with the wording of some of the motions presented. We have definitely found frustration with phrases like, "This should not be about politics," followed often by a diatribe about cuts. But so what? Our duty remains the best healthcare for our residents. It is the same for every member in this room. We have previously and consistently voted in solidarity, despite concerns about wording, as we will for this motion. I leave you with a reminder of SATH's own words. Page 33, top paragraph of their own impact statement. Some of you will remember this, dated the 2nd of November 2016 for option C1, which is what we're getting, the forced transfer of acute and consultant-led women and children's services to the Royal Shrewsbury Hospital. I quote, "The greatest adverse impact appears to be on preschool age, BME, female and deprived populations of Lakeside South, the Wrekin and Hadley Castle," that's Telford. Members, the very people the NHS is supposed to protect. What has changed since then? Are these groups magically better able to fend for themselves? Manifestly not. We on this side unreservedly support consultant-led women's and children's services at the Princess Royal Hospital. On the basis the motion is explicit about retaining those services at PRH, we support this motion. Thank you.
Right, Councillor Overton. Three minutes.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. We again meet tonight to discuss our fantastic Princess Royal Hospital and the decision by the Health Secretary to allow Future Fit to progress. We all know this will have a detrimental impact on our residents in Telford and Wrekin, ourselves too who live and work here, and I have no doubt this decision and the changes proposed will put lives at risk. It was very clear time and time again Future Fit flies in the face of the clinical evidence and common sense. Telford is one of the fastest growing towns and a driver to create jobs and growth. Businesses are attracted here, but what will new businesses or expanded business owners think now? They don't even have an A&E. The closure of a fantastic consultant-led women and children's unit flies in the face of all clinical evidence, the same evidence that got it sited here and built at a cost of £28 million only 5 years ago. What an absolute waste of money. And we must reject this A&E local model, pertaining to be given us something we asked for. It is just the overnight closure by a different name, and also gives the consultant on duty less support and little room for movement than the overnight closure would have delivered. We need a fully functioning 24/7 A&E in our town. As councillors and residents, we have all heard stories from local people of how valued the Women and Children's Centre is. And some of these stories are quite amazing, especially when you add in how quick some tell of the emergency that arose and the immediate needs of that situation. I dread to think what could happen travelling an extra 15 miles to Shrewsbury. This administration and this council have fought the Future Fit process every step of the way, and we know the full implications of it for our borough. We will continue to fight it, as that is the right thing to do and in the best interests of our residents. And I find it shameful that some of the comments from the opposition about not putting the blame at this government or the Secretary of State, because he signed the letter, he is funding the changes for Future Fit. The decision made by the Secretary of State is simply wrong. Even Tory MPs locally say this decision should be put on the Prime Minister's desk. So even they know this decision can be reversed and their Conservative government can stop it. A reckless decision made in Whitehall, hundreds of miles away, that could end up risking the lives of our residents or even our own families. This decision needs to be reversed. We must send that message tonight loud and clear. Secretary of State, stop Future Fit. Stop the downgrade of our A&E and stop the relocation of our fabulous Women and Children's Centre. The party of the NHS, says Boris Johnson. Bar humbug, I say.
Thank you. Councillor Bentley.
Mr Speaker, colleagues, there's many accusations being thrown about tonight, but this chamber has cross-party supported the leader on every occasion during this battle with Future Fit. He has on numerous occasions stated there would be no political bias and there is a willingness from him to work cross-party. However, he has failed to engage and continues to throw in little innuendos about who is to blame. He wanted support from the Chamber for judicial review. He got it. He asked for support for an independent review. He got it. He asked, the independent review panel was set. Therefore, our request was heard. The IRP have reported, as I understand, their findings, and the Secretary of State then made his decision on that recommendation. He did, however, place a caveat on the decision that the community of the Borough of BTW must be provided with A&E. As of yet, I do not believe full detail of that provision has been decided. On that basis, we are asked to condemn his decision. Is the leader, this is a question, is the leader able to provide evidence of ours to the IRP, which he obviously feels the Secretary of State has ignored in reaching his decision? Because I haven't seen that. As for the second part of this motion, I stand ready to be accused of being pedantic. Once more, the leader and the administration forgot the hospital services we are collectively seeking to retain are not just for the people in the new town population of Telford. They are collectively for the entire borough, which also has a population in the rural areas, whose communities make up at least half the population that will be affected by any loss or downgrading. I think there is a clue in my statement in our authority's name. Members, it goes without saying, we have a duty to our community to ensure we collectively continue to support their interests, their well-being at all times, even when the battle is potentially lost before it has begun. A situation I have met many times with policy on a number of occasions. As for the combined actions of our two parliamentary members, who it appears the leader is also suggesting are not challenging vigorously enough on behalf of the constituents, where's his evidence? I wholeheartedly agree the retention of women in children's unit, likewise the A&E, but we must ensure that we guarantee accessibility to that hospital for all, with public transport available to all and potential future congestion eliminated at the earliest opportunity.
All right, thank you. Councillor Dugmore.
Yes, thank you, Mr. Speaker. We stand here not only as representatives of the people of Telford Wrekin, but also as residents of the borough, and we all reaffirm our commitment to the Princess Royal Hospital. The Future Fit decision always had an air of inevitability about it, from the carefully presented statistics to the disproportionate influence and representation of our Welsh neighbours, despite no promise of contributions from their own NHS. While I welcome the record investment in our hospital services, as we know, the money could be more effectively spent with better health outcomes if a new facility was planned between Telford and Shrewsbury. It's deeply regretful that only now does the council leader support such a proposal. Too little, too late. There was already support from Shropshire Council. With both councils on board, we would now be in a state of eager anticipation for the future of our hospital services. Instead, this council has followed a policy of whatever is proposed, we're against it, resulting in no influence or impact on the decision-making process, despite widespread public outcry. Lack of engagement at the start of the process was followed by name-calling and threats of legal action. The executive really don't get it. The decision is political, is non-political. I thought you'd like that. The decision is non-political, yet the council has pursued nothing but a political agenda resulting in the wishes and needs of Telford and Wrekin residents being sidelined as a direct result. The Secretary of State had no choice but to accept the recommendation of the independent review panel. This is a clinical decision. If he was making a political decision, he wouldn't be making it now with so close to an impending election. Future Fit was all about the redevelopment of the Royal Shrewsbury Hospital and not about the needs of the expanding population and change of demographics. I congratulate the Future Fit team for their perseverance and dedication in delivering a decision not supported by the health and population statistics. The new Women and Children's Unit, Princess Royal, is a fantastic facility delivered due to the hard work put in by many, including our own Councillor Veronica Fletcher, without whom it would not have happened. It makes no sense to move this facility. The Future Fit money would be better spent by reversing the plan and citing the services proposed for Shrewsbury and Telford and those proposed for Telford in Shrewsbury, saving the cost of transferring the new state-of-the-art facility. This would result in health services located where there is greatest need and with similar, if not improved, outcomes. We've been told many times by the Future Fit team that ambulance transfer times are not a significant factor in survival rates, and the area ambulance could still be located at Shrewsbury. Mr. Speaker, I don't support the Future Fit decision. I await with interest the details of the proposed A&E locals and look forward to seeing how it will differ from the original proposed urgent care centre. I just hope for the sake of us all and the fantastic NHS staff who continue to provide a first-class service despite all the uncertainty, that the money should be spent, the money starts to be spent and we get the 21st century health service that we all deserve.
Councillor Shirley Reynolds.
Like others have said tonight, I can't actually speak tonight without thanking our NHS staff for their hard work and dedication. The decision to close our Women and Children's Unit and to cut the A&E department in our borough is unbelievable. Ordinary hard-working families in Telford will be very hit hard by this closure and lives will be put at risk. There are many families whose children's lives would have been lost without our Women and Children's Unit. I can't even begin to imagine the pain that a suffering parent whose child needs urgent care goes through knowing that that help is just not out there. Our services should not be under threat. We desperately need proper planning and investment in the NHS, not cutting even more services, especially in a growing town like Telford. We're a young town with more children per family than anywhere else in the county. Our population warrants both the Women and Children's Unit and the 24-hour, 7 days a week A&E. Our borough should not and must not lose these services. How can the proven clinical need for the Women and Children's Unit change in just 5 years? The government should be investing in our NHS. They have a choice about how they treat those in need in our society. Money should be invested in our health service, improving services for everyone. The current Prime Minister claims he wants to improve the health services as one of his election pledges. Well, let's just see if he can put his money where his mouth is. This is the front line of our NHS and it is in crisis. I urge the government to reverse the decision to close our Women and Children's Centre in Telford and our A&E 24/7 consultant-led unit. The current proposal will only add further to the NHS crisis. NHS England has revealed that the new A&E local service will only be available during core hours. Do you think families can manage to only be in need of urgent care during core hours only? At least NHS England appear to know what A&E local is. That's more than can be said for our MPs. Don't know, don't care, just making noises because an election is in the air. Well, this administration has always been committed to protecting the women and children and A&E facilities at the Princess Royal Hospital for residents. We're not scaremongering. It's for our residents and we will continue to fight to protect the services. Telford has a growing population and our hospital services must not be closed. This shouldn't be about politics, it's about people's lives. This motion must receive cross-party support and I urge all members to support it. Lobby the MPs and the Secretary of State. It is only this government that can reverse this decision. They must reverse the decision and not close our women and children's unit. I support the motion, and I just pray that it will not be under my watch that we go down fighting with this.
Right, thank you. Councillor Offland.
Mr. Speaker, Council, the strategy here is quite clear. That is that we retain a women's and children's centre and an A&E for the population that we have, and the growing population outside of Telford and Wrekin for the fact that we are growing. Future Fit is quite simply slash, trash and privatise cuts. Being deliberately underfunded, people's lives being put at risk every day. The decision made by the Secretary of State is that. What more do people have to lose? Through cuts. What does it mean? Cuts to services. You know, we had to give up our cottage hospitals. Now they're taking away the A&E. What next? And this shouldn't have to happen. Future Fit is unfit for purpose, and for the government need to listen, and now before someone dies.
Thank you. Councillor Clare.
Going to work. There must be an easy way with one of these. I can shout loud. I'll be very quick after this. A&E and the children's unit are interwoven. For the last 2 or 3 years, I've sat at meetings that have told me that you can't have a women's and children's unless you've got an A&E. So this is the backward way of closing both. I find it appalling that we have got a population that we've got, and a young population, that anybody could sit down and even have the gall to put some of this on paper. Do they live in Telford and Wrekin? I don't know. But I'd be surprised. And this, well, we marched to get a hospital. Now we are marching to stop it closing. What is this borough coming to?
Councillor McClements, please. And she's my final listed speaker. Oh, one more.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Actually, I wasn't going to speak tonight, but I have to say the shocking and quite frankly disgraceful response from Councillor Eade made me stand up and speak. I think it was a shambolic political attack on a council that has fought hard and campaigned hard to retain our hospital service, and we continue to campaign with that fight with this motion this evening. The decision of the Health Secretary to allow Future Fit to progress means that our hospital, the PRH, will be downgraded. It's something that I've campaigned for with my Labour colleagues and fought against for many, many years. This is absolutely devastating news for Telford and Wrekin. I find it unbelievable that a decision can be made to close our consultant-led Women and Children's Centre, which was based on clinical need. Clinical need. and I just can't comprehend the complete lack of rational understanding by the Health Secretary to recognise the importance of the need for a Women and Children's Centre in Telford. As the motion says, we will be one of the biggest towns in the country without a full 24/7 consultant-led A&E. The Women and Children's Centre falls, closes, moves to Shrewsbury, 28 million down the drain. And it looks as though the MP for Telford has even turned against her own Health Secretary, saying on Radio Shropshire, and I quote, "It worries me that the Health Minister didn't understand how controversial this decision was going to be." That was her quote. And now, in absolute desperation, she is saying the book stops with Boris Johnson. So she's blaming her government for that decision, and she wants Boris Johnson to make that change. We all know the Health Secretary has made the wrong decision. I'm not even convinced that he's looked into the matter in any detail or taken it seriously. Unbelievably, I have to say, the MP for the Wrekin, who recently got himself out of his bunker now a general election is looming, says in his car crash radio interview, it's great news for the residents of Telford and Wrekin. He says, don't worry, we will have an accident emergency unit. Do you know, he makes it sound as though we haven't got one already. And we should all be so grateful for the so-called A&E local, which no one knows or understands anything about. Do you know, you really couldn't make it up, could you? You really couldn't make it up. So I wholeheartedly support this motion tonight. So let's have a unanimous decision. Thank you.
Right, thank you. Councillor David Wright.
Speaker, this is the first time I've spoken in public for some time, and it saddens me to have to say, I told you so, because I was warning of this many, many years ago. We've had a Conservative government in this country now for 2 terms, one leading a coalition government and one governing on its own, and I've never trusted them with our health service, and I never will. When the health service was established by the post-war Labour government, it was a covenant between the people, and successive governments have endeavoured to protect it and develop it, of all parties. Some have done it better than others. But it's crucially important that people in government honour the principle that we all pay our taxes to receive a health service. And another thing that post-war Labour government established when it set up the NHS was that local authorities and local communities would have a say in how their services were managed and developed. And quite frankly, this decision by the Secretary of State flies in the face of that principle. I fought really hard to secure the Women and Children's Unit at the Princess Royal Hospital, the £28 million Women and Children's Unit. And when we secured that unit, it felt like we had secured the future of our hospital. Because as Councillor Clare says quite rightly, you have to have an integrated service between women and children and between a fully staffed 24/7 A&E service. And we thought to ourselves, great, we've hit the jackpot here, we've protected our hospital and we've got the services we need for the long term and into the future. And so what's so demoralising about this decision is that Women and Children's Unit, that fantastic unit that was opened by the Princess Royal herself, is now to be moved over to Shrewsbury. No evidence, no clinical need established, no structure established for that change and for that move. We have some of the most deprived communities, not just in Shropshire and Telford and Wrekin, but also across the West Midlands living in our town. And we need those services to be provided locally. And the echo on is that 24/7 A&E is going to disappear as well. We're going to get basically a walk-in centre by the look of it. And what will happen is, when the consultant on the front end, who's triaging, as Councillor Burford said, people coming in, is not available, or the rota pattern doesn't fit, there will be no consultant service. That's my concern. And we'll see a slow and eroding service at our local hospital. This is the thin end of the wedge, folks. This is what happens when you start to cut back a hospital and it stops being a district general hospital. It just becomes a facility that carries out medical procedures on the basis of decisions made in Shrewsbury. The Secretary of State can change this decision. The Prime Minister can alter this decision. They can stop it now, so they should.
Leader Councillor Davis to reply.
Mr. Speaker, it's been a sad debate, but an inspiring debate at times too. I think the opposition party have been all over the place this evening. Some say it's an inevitable decision, there was nothing anybody could do, but then someone else blames us. You have the leader of the Conservative group saying defer the decision, and then you've got others saying this needs to stop immediately. You've got people saying it's not a political decision, but want to take credit for the £312 million loan that they're going to get. I know that there's changes afoot in the Conservative group, Mr. Speaker, but they really need to do better than what they are. They're complete shambolic and a disgrace to this town. Mr. Speaker, the reality is that we, as a council, unanimously voted to refer this decision to the Health Secretary. To the Health Secretary. Those are the regulations. You don't need to be a legal expert, Andrew, to understand plain common sense language. Even you should be able to understand that. It's the Health Secretary who's made the decision. Advisers advise, ministers decide, as somebody once said. And that's what's happened here. So how dare the Conservative group try and mislead and lie to residents of Telford Wrekin to try and say that it's nothing to do with the Health Secretary. What a disgrace. Mr. Speaker, the NHS is political. The NHS is political. It was a Labour government that created the NHS, and a Labour government that invested in the NHS, and a Labour government that has to clear up the mess from each Conservative government that goes by. Mr. Speaker, the Northumberland model has been mentioned. On the one hand, they want to pray and aid the panel's review, but on the other hand, they don't accept that the Northumberland model was rejected by the same panel. It's intellectually dishonest, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, it's time that we came together as residents. This Labour group, Katrina Gilman, has done her bit. She's got the commitment from our Shadow Health Secretary. If there's a general election in the next couple of weeks and Labour win the general election, we will scrap Future Fit. Mr. Speaker, it is a clear referendum, this general election. A vote for the Labour Party that will scrap Future Fit, a vote for the Conservative Party that will deliver a Sainsbury's local, an NHS local, and a wasted vote with the Liberal Democrats who will just let the Conservatives in. Mr. Speaker, it's time Telford and Wrekin residents made their choice. Back the Labour Party, back this Labour Council, let's scrap Future Fit.
Before we move to the vote, I just wish to make a comment. Councillor Clare stated that people in this room campaigned to get that hospital, the District General Hospital, 40 plus years ago. Yes, I'm getting some nods from colleagues who were there. There was a ministerial deputation, which I didn't go on, but we were active in making the case for Telford's District General Hospital. 40 years later, with continued growth and development in this town and industry, MOD, other industries, the need is proven and greater. Right? So I just wanted to make that statement because we were there. We got that hospital and we want to keep it. We were there. Cross-party, cross-business, trade unions. We worked together. Right. We now move to the... Right, enough people standing, is that enough? Okay, thank you. Recorded vote has been agreed. Right, Deb, can you do your thing? So to speak.
Excuse me, Speaker, can we start at the bottom?
No, let's get you out the way.
Councillor Bentley. Councillor Blundell. Councillor Boylan. Councillor Burford. Councillor Burrell. Councillor Collier. Sorry. Councillor Eric Carter. Councillor Cassar. Councillor Clare. Councillor Cook. Councillor Davis. Councillor Doug Moore. Councillor Eade. Councillor Arnold England. Councillor Nathan England. Councillor Evans. Councillor Ian Fletcher. Councillor Veronica Fletcher. Councillor Greenaway. Councillor Holt. Councillor Hoskin. Councillor Yanker. Councillor Jawar. Councillor Kiernan. Councillor Lavery. Councillor McClements. Councillor Mehta. Councillor Murray. Councillor Nelson. Councillor Offland. Councillor Overton. Councillor Gilly Reynolds. Councillor Shirley Reynolds. Councillor Steve Reynolds. Councillor Rhodes. Councillor Sahota. Councillor Scott. Councillor Charles Smith. Councillor Malcolm Smith. Councillor Thompson. Councillor Karen Tomlinson. Councillor Bill Tomlinson. Councillor Turley. Councillor Watling. And Councillor Wright.
Unanimous?
Carried.
Yes, unanimous. Thank you. Before we close the meeting, I have an additional item. I've been advised that there's a request for a leave of absence for Councillor Jane Pinter, who's been called back into hospital and is unable to attend tonight. Can I have a mover and a seconder, please? Seconded. All right. All in favour? Unanimous. Thank you very much. All right, that's it. All right, thank you for your attendance. I declare the meeting closed.